correspondent Alan Little reports on how the UK's understanding of the war and its consequences have changed in the past 100 years.
No war in history had demanded so much, mobilised so many, or killed in such numbers. And when it was over, the men who fought it began asking questions that have never gone away. What was it for, and was it worth it? We remember them now with public reverence, but the way we think about the war they fought has changed dramatically in the 100 years since it ended. This is Dryborough Abbey in the Scottish borders, where Britain's military commander Earl Douglas Haig is buried. When he died 10 years after the war ended, he was a venerated public figure, the architect of victory and national salvation. His funeral procession in both London and Edinburgh drew more than 1 million people onto the streets. Haig's reputation has risen and fallen over the century as each new generation reinterprets the First World War in the light of its own values. By the 1960s, Haig wasn't a national hero anymore. He was a public villain, the butcher of the Somme who'd sent hundreds of thousands of young men to their deaths needlessly. In this version, the war was above all futile. In 1917, the war poets Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon met here at Craiglockett War Hospital in Edinburgh. But it wasn't until the 1960s, the age of emerging youth culture, Vietnam and anti-war sentiment, that their depiction of the horror and pity of the war gained widespread popular traction.
It timed well both in terms of the cultural narrative but also the military political scene within the world at that time, and all of those things have come colliding together and given Owen a renaissance and a rebirth, and that message of futility really strong in people's narrative at that time.
The Britain that emerged from the armistice would never be the same. The war had had a powerful democratising effect, for the men who fought it came home to demand a new place in society for the common citizen.
We were promised lands for heroes to live in and all that sort of thing. But when we came home, we found nothing.
There was no cheering, no singing. We were drained of all emotion, really. That's what it amounted to, you see.
They started marching around the camp, singing out, "We want food, we want money."
The government was obviously very concerned about what would happen when the guys came back, particularly because the Labour Party had grown, and then there'd been the Russian Revolution in 1917. So they were really scared there'd be some socialist uprising. I mean, the term citizenship comes into use in the 20s and 30s, which never had been before because the British were subjects of the Crown. They weren't citizens, which I think is something new after the war.
They thought they had fought the war that would end all wars. They had not. But the Britain we inherit today, its citizens' democracy, grew out of their extraordinary sacrifice. Alan Little, BBC News.